How do you feel about food? I'm pretty sure that I like food a whole lot more than I like much of the conversations I see about food, food ingredients, and even nutrition on social media platforms. Quite frankly, I find it a little overwhelming and can come away a little confused. But thankfully, Virginia Tech's Melissa Wright is an expert in this very subject and was kind enough to join the podcast to help me navigate this space. Melissa is the director of the Food Producer Technical Assistance Network at Virginia Tech, which supports food entrepreneurs by assisting with nutrition label content, food safety analysis, and pertinent food regulations. The program's goal is to help Virginia's food processing industry produce high quality, safe, and innovative food products. So Melissa and I talked a little bit about labels and how I should even interpret labels, the numbers on the back, the list of ingredients. We also talked about topics like raw milk, protein, ultra-processed food, and even color additives, with me basically asking the same questions. How can I navigate these conversations? So if you, like I, have been a little overwhelmed by all the information out there, I think this podcast will have a lot for you to chew on. I'm Travis Williams, and this is Virginia Tech's Curious Conversations. I want to talk to you about buzzworthy food conversations that I keep seeing everywhere. And the reason I want to talk to you is because I think I'm tired of just leaning into social media for all of, my guidance in this area personally.
Right.
But I think maybe a good place to start this conversation is simply, what is extension and what do you do with extension in this space?
So extension is a really large umbrella that exists at Virginia Tech and also at Virginia State University. There are employees who are extension focused, and extension means that we take all the great research that's being done by our colleagues and distill it down to a way that the general public can understand it. So we are science communicators. So my job is to talk about all of my colleagues who are doing science research in microorganisms and packaging and food safety and things like that, and put that information into a way that the general public can understand. And then also do programming that teaches, in my case, food producers, food safety, food labeling, and that kind of stuff.
That sounds like a great job. It sounds very similar to what I'm trying to do with this podcast, really, is take very complicated things and hopefully make them more accessible and understandable and usable for people. Well, on the topic of foods, I know you do a lot of work with labels, and you just mentioned labels with producers. But me as a consumer, as a shopper, what's just maybe some general good guidance on how I should approach a label? How should I interpret those?
Well, that's a good question. There's a lot of discussions back and forth about something as simple as what a product is called. You think about plant milk and things like that. Can they use the word milk? So there's a lot of information on the package you could glean. So packages are required to have a certain number of things. They have to have the product's name, which may be something that has a standard of identity, like cottage cheese or skim milk. Those things are defined. And so to call a product something, it actually has to meet that definition. So if you look at, say, mayonnaise, you look at Hellman's mayonnaise, mayonnaise is a definition. If you look at Miracle Whip, it's not called mayonnaise because it's called salad dressing, because it's a difference in what it actually is chemically. It's really the amount of oil it has in it. That's really the difference between those two products. Or you look at whipped cream versus, dessert topping. So you can glean a lot by what the product is actually called. And that tells you a lot about what it actually is as far as standard of identity, which is, in the law, it says standard of identity for milk is this. And so it has to have that. It has to have a net weight. So the package has to tell you how much you're actually getting in the package. And that has to be true to what's actually in there. It has to be at least what's in there. It can be less than. You can have more product in the package than it says it has. That's fine. You can never have less, though. So if something says it's 16 fluid ounces, it has to have at least that much in there. It has to have the manufacturer's contact information so that the consumer can contact the manufacturer if they have a question, or if they have a concern, or there's a recall or something like that. And it has to have an ingredient statement. And so the ingredient statement is listed in order of predominance. So it's listed in the amount of, this is the greatest thing, and it goes all the way down in order of predominance. And so you can glean a lot about what's in your product. You see those, water is always close to the top a lot of times, right? Water is an ingredient. If it's in there, it has to be included. So, you can tell by how high salt or sugar is in that list, how much of something is really salty, it's going to be really at the top of the list, right? You can also glean that information from the nutrition facts panel. Some things are not required to have a nutrition facts panel. It depends on the size of the producer. It depends on whether there's actually any nutritive content in the product. But so you can glean a lot from that too. So if you're looking at salt or sugar, you're worried about there are natural sugars in foods. So you may see a large number for total sugars. Like if you look at a can of pineapple that's just in pineapple juice, it's going to have a lot of sugar because it's natural sugar. But if you look at the line that says added sugars, it's probably going to be zero unless there's been sugar added to sweeten it. So that information, people don't always understand the difference between total sugars and added sugars. And the same for sodium. You know, if you have a lot of salt in there, you're going to have a really high sodium number. And it's nice because it actually gives you the number, the amount of sodium that's in a serving, but it also gives you the percent daily value that's over there. And that gives you an idea of how much am I eating in this one serving relative to how much I should have in one day. And so we often find ourselves helping these small to mid-sized producers, helping them actually create the nutrition facts panels for their food products and actually helping them write the ingredient statements as well. And so, because a lot of times people are using value added products for their foods, if they're making a barbecue sauce, they might start with Heinz ketchup and, you know, Heinz mustard, Worcestershire sauce. They're adding some onions or something like that, right? So they have to actually take everything that's on the label of the ingredients they're using and move it to their label. And sometimes you can do that in a couple of different ways. So we help them do that so that it's correct. So they're actually including all the correct ingredients on their statements. So I spend a lot of time reading and writing ingredient statements. And so it's kind of fun sometimes to look at something and try to interpret exactly what's going on. There are some generic things people can use in ingredient statements, which is always interesting. You can say spices, and spices encompasses a really large list of things, not to include, though, garlic powder, onion powder, salt. Those are not spices. They have to actually be called out by name. So those are always interesting to see. If you ever see one that says spices and coloring, that means that they've added something that may be a spice, but it also may be imparting color, and it may be paprika, saffron, or turmeric. Those are considered coloring agents as well as spices because they're usually added for color and not necessarily for flavor. So I can go down a really long rabbit hole on ingredient statements.
Wow. Yeah. Well, and also I know just because my wife has a gluten intolerance or allergy, that natural flavorings is something she's always like. We have to be very careful about that because they can hide gluten in that. And so we're very careful about that. I do think with labeling, the first thing you said about skim milk, I do think that Ron Swanson says that skim milk's label is a lie, that it shouldn't be called milk, but
It
that's
should
a
be called
preference.
water.
That well, I think that's super helpful. But speaking about milk, that was one of the things I wanted to ask you about because I see a lot of stuff just bubble up in my own world about not just milk, but raw milk. And to be completely honest with you, I really wasn't even sure when we started this conversation. I talked to you earlier, a couple weeks ago, what raw milk even meant.
Mhm.
So maybe that's a good question. What is raw milk, and how should I navigate this raw milk discussion?
Raw milk just means milk that has not been pasteurized for safety. And pasteurization is a heat step that kills microorganisms that could and often are in the fluid milk just by virtue of the environment in which it's produced.
Okay. Well, is there an upside to having raw milk? Is there a downside to having? Is there danger to having it? How do I make
Yeah.
sense of this?
I guess it depends on who you ask. From
Mm,
from a food safety
mhm.
standpoint, yes, there are inherent dangers with drinking raw milk, especially to those people who we consider the category of people that are called yopi, the young, old, pregnant, or infirmed. Those are the most susceptible parts of our population. And so to them, ingesting something like the pathogens that may be in raw milk can be especially dangerous. It can be deadly. So from a public safety, food safety standpoint, we do not advocate drinking raw milk. People are free to make their own decisions about what they ingest in their own homes, and that's fine. If people want to buy raw milk, there are ways around it. There are loopholes. You could buy herd shares. So you essentially buy the rights to the milk from a cow that is in a herd. So you don't actually buy the raw milk itself. You say, I'm buying a portion of a cow that's in a herd share. So then when that cow gets milked, I get the milk. So they're not really buying the raw milk. They're actually buying rights to the milk. And so, people have a belief, people who are raw milk proponents have a belief that oftentimes, that the pasteurization makes it less nutritious or that it takes something away from the milk itself from a standpoint of what they want to be ingesting. So if they want to drink milk that is unpasteurized because they feel that there are health benefits to it, That's fine. They just can't then they people can't take raw milk and actually just sell it, and you can't make any products like in Virginia, you can't make raw milk cheeses and sell them from your home. You have to make them under really strict regulations because we know there are inherent dangers with milk, and then we just know that there are pathogens that can survive in milk, which is why pasteurization has become a thing.
Yeah, well, that helps me out a lot with understanding kind of like, again, how to make sense of that conversation. Another conversation that comes up a lot, especially in my parent circles, is related to food dyes. And I am not 100% sure, again, what food dyes even consist of and if there are different, maybe different levels and different types of dyes. So how should I make sense of food dyes?
So back to our conversation about ingredient statements, there are some colors that have to be called out by name, and those are called certified colors. Those are the ones that you see that sometimes will say FD&C red 40. They might just say red 40. Those are certified colors, which means that they are synthetically produced by a company using, whatever mechanism there are to produce them. They are not made from petroleum. They are not made from gas. People have, this misnomer that these are, they say that they're, I can't remember the wording that people have been using in the hot button issues, but, they are organic. They have carbon and hydrogen and oxygen. So they are organic chemicals that are being synthesized, but they are not being made from petroleum products. So they take gas from the gas station and turn it into red 40. That's not what's happening. But those are synthesized in a factory and they're called certified because there's a certain standard. They have to meet a certain color standard so that the food is repeatably the same color every time when you use that certified color, right? So we can use red 40, yellow 5, yellow 6, blue 1, blue 2, something like that. Those all have a standard. They are a certain color. And so those are also really highly purified and tested for pathogens to make sure that they don't have anything in there. And then they're sold as a coloring to these food companies. They're used in very minuscule amounts. There have been some that have been recently taken off the market. So Red 3 was actually removed from the market because under what's called the Delaney Clause, which was a clause that said if something causes cancer in humans or animals, it cannot be used in food, right? So they did animal studies and it caused cancer in these animal studies, Red 3 did. So it's taken off the market. Now I say that and people say, "Oh my gosh, it caused cancer." Okay, well, if you pump any animal full of something long enough in such quantities, it may indeed give them cancer. So I will say that's how those studies work, right? As far as Red 40 is concerned, like I have 3 sons and a daughter, all of which who have varying levels of ADHD. And, I mean, is that genetic? Is that food coloring? I don't really know. I mean, there are studies that link Red 40 specifically hyperactivity in children, but as people say, sometimes, it's the poison is in the dose. It's not really what you're taking or what you're eating. It's really in the amount of what you're eating. So everything in moderation, right? Like your body can't live without a little bit of salt. If you eat too much, it can kill you, right? So as a parent, it's like, is it a fight that I fight? Do I try to find things that only have then instead of having certified colors have natural colors or just other colors added? So those other colors are coming from vegetative or fruit material. A lot of times you might get a red from, beets. You might get blues from blueberries. You might get greens from spinach or matcha. You get yellows from saffron or turmeric. And the problem with replacing all these certified colors with natural colors now is that it's going to increase the price of the product because there's a lot more demand. You have to grow a whole field of carrots before you can make a color out of those carrots, right? So you have to grow that whole field of carrots, harvest it, process them. You get a really small amount of dye that you put on the market. So it's a supply and demand question. So that cost gets passed along to somebody. So your food cost is going to go up. Smaller producers are going to be a lot less likely to be able to keep up with that price change without passing it along to their end consumers. So it's a supply and demand question. And it's just also it's a repeatability question. Like if you make something with carrot dye, a dye that you've synthesized from carrots, is it going to look the same batch after batch after batch? No, it's really not because it's going to be all in how that crop look. There's no standards for it, right? And so as consumers, we usually eat with our eyes first before we even smell it or taste it, right? So you go down the cereal aisle and you have all those boxes of really bright, Tricks and Apple Jacks and whatever they are, right? The consumer sees the same thing when they pour it in that bowl every time. That's comforting, that's nostalgic, that's what you're expecting. As you move to natural colors, though, you're not going to see the same thing every time. And the consumer might think, is that a quality defect? Is that a safety problem? Should I eat this now? So it begets a whole another round of questions. It may answer the questions about, oh, I'm not eating synthetic dyes. But now it's like, well, doesn't look like the same as what I ate last time. Is it as safe as it was? I don't really know. So as with a lot of things, you answer some questions and you just generate more.
Yeah, that it reminds me of when the ketchup came out and it was green and I couldn't eat it. I had friends
Yeah.
that could eat it. I couldn't eat it. I was like, it
Yep.
doesn't taste the same.
The
It
purple ketchup
probably
was the same way to me. I was like, "No, no, I can't do it. It's just not
just
right."
there was nothing I wanted about that. I've also wondered, and I'm not, this is like a very uneducated just thought that I have because I'm not an expert in really anything, but I've also wondered with like food dyes and kids and hyperactivity because I also have a young kid. I've noticed there's a correlation, it seems, between things that are very brightly colored and having like a high sugar content. Like we don't really have a lot of nutritious food that's also pink,
No,
artificially colored. So I
right.
just, I don't know how much, I don't know how much we give to like the sugar versus like the color. Like, I'm not really sure.
Exactly. It's hard to find something that's sugar free that is also bright red, right? Like I think about those little drinks that my kids love in the little plastic barrels with the foil on top. And they're like these really vivid colors and they're just like 72% sugar or something. Well, yeah. Is it the sugar that's making them hyperactive or is it the red 40? I'm betting it's probably the sugar, right? And that leads us into another question, which is really hot at the moment is processed foods and ultra processed foods. And, there really is no clear definition. I think that's something that the government is working on is what is a processed food? And so that's another buzzword that people get afraid to hear is I don't want to eat processed food. Well, when you buy a cantaloupe and it's been cut at the counter in the fruit counter in the Kroger, it's already been processed, right? So that cutting is a processed food. So minimally processed, right? But it is still processed food. But as you process things and processing just can mean cooking or heating or grinding or something, all kinds of different things, you may be actually removing nutrients and you may be changing the color of that product as you cook it. So then you're adding colors or sugars or salts or stabilizers back to it to get it to a form where it's going to be, on the shelf for longer for the consumer. And so those are truly those really highly processed foods. Like we talk about cereal. Cereal is really highly processed. Most cereals are. It's not the grain that came out of the earth. It's the grain plus some sugar, plus some color, plus some stabilizers, plus some things to make it sit on the shelf long enough. But Americans we're eaters of convenience. It's really very easy to go to the store and be like, hey, cereal's on sale. I'm going to buy 9 boxes and my kids are going to have it all summer long because I know otherwise, yeah, my kids will eat a whole box of cereal a day if I let them. We don't live in a society like Europe where you can just go to the market every day and buy the things you want to have every day to eat. It's just, we're not set up that way. So our food system reflects the choices that we make and the way our towns and lives are set up.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, we don't have a Lucky Charms tree, which I guess
Wouldn't
is
it be
kind of what
great
we're
though?
getting at. It would be great. It might also be dangerous. Well, speaking of labels and nutrition panels, one of the labels that pops up on stuff seemingly all the time now, even cereal, I saw it just this morning, is protein. We now have protein in a lot of different things. So how can I make sense of protein and protein content in all these different items?
So the first thing that's important to know is not all protein is created equal. So different protein from different sources our bodies can use differently. So they're what are called complete proteins, meaning they have all the amino acids that our body might need. So things like eggs and things like that have really high amount of protein that our bodies can actually use and turn into muscle essentially is what it's going to end up doing over time, right? And some protein is really just filler protein. Like it doesn't have a very high nutritional content for our bodies to use. So if you look at a nutrition panel, and so we talked about how there's an amount in grams or milligrams for different things, and there's also a percent daily value. Now, protein is one of those that if you look at the panel on something and you only see it has 6 grams of protein, but there's no number in the percent daily value column, that means that that product is not likely to have really high quality of protein because you have to actually be able to do some testing that is called the protein digestibility amino acid score. And so we call that PDCAS. And that is essentially an assay that can be done in a laboratory to determine how complete that protein is. how that means how much the human body can actually glean. If I'm ingesting that 6 grams of protein, am I really getting 6 grams of protein, or am I getting 2 grams of really low quality protein? Or, and so if a product has a claim, so a label claim is something that, you could put on a product that says low in sodium, fat free, sugar free, good source of protein. So for something that is actually bearing a protein claim, that means they've done that background work and they've actually figured out the quality of that protein. And so that product will have a percent daily value. And that percent daily value is really, if you're looking at protein specifically on your label, that's going to be the most important information for you to have is the percent daily value, not really the grams of protein, because the percent daily value is going to give you an idea of the quality of that protein relative to how much you should be taking in as a member of the general public. If you're looking at being a bodybuilder or whatever, you're going to look at the quality of your protein, not just the number of grams of your protein.
Yeah, those percent daily values are, I mean, I assume they're based on kind of just a broad population. But I
Yes.
guess that would be different for everybody. So I'm not, how should we interpret that? I guess.
So there are general population numbers, and that's like if you're between 18 and 64 or whatever. But then there are foods, if foods are targeted to children, there's a whole different set of percent daily values for toddlers, for infants. So those foods that are baby foods that are specifically targeted to them, they have a whole different percent daily value. They have a whole different list of nutrients they should be taking in versus just a general adult. And so, yeah, the numbers that you see a percent daily value are generic to just the general public. And I will say also, there's a lot of latitude in rounding when it comes to nutrition facts panels. It says 30 calories. Well, that could be 31, that could be 34. There's a lot of rounding that goes on in all of those numbers, and those rules exist for a reason. So it doesn't say 47.9 calories. That's a very specific number. Are you always going to have 47.9? No. Are you going to generally almost always have about 45? Sure. So take that for what you will. It's those numbers are accurate. They're just not very precise.
Yeah, that's a
So
really good way to
just
think
something
about
to
that.
keep in mind as well. And somebody like I've been on a weight loss journey my entire life. I've been on Weight Watchers for probably 20 years now. And so, you keep track of your calories or your fat or whatever those metrics are that you're trying to, you're like, why am I not losing weight? Well, because you're dealing with imperfect information sometimes, or not just imprecise. It's not as precise as it could be sometimes.
Yeah. I think that's really helpful to keep in mind, and a really I like the it's accurate but maybe not precise. That's a great, I think, just thing to keep in mind when we're looking labels.
Exactly. I mean, there are so many like strict guardrails I could put in my life, but I'm just going to spend my entire life trying to live within those guardrails, and then I'm just going to not enjoy anything that's going on out here. Sometimes you just have to eat to be happy. Eat to live. Sometimes you just have to have 3 donuts instead of just the one. I mean, just depends on the day, right?
I think that's fair. Well, is there any other kind of buzzworthy food things that you have seen out there that really kind of stick in your craw?
Yeah, I mean, one that always makes me laugh is when I go to the grocery store and see people buying alkaline water. So the pH has been inflated to a point where it's like 9.5 or something like that. So your normal water, when you buy like bottled water, the pH is going to be neutral, 6, 7, something like that. And so I don't understand why alkaline water is a thing, because as soon as you ingest it, it's going to hit the acid that's in your stomach, which is a pH that's less than 2. So it's going to immediately be acidified. So, maybe you're drinking it for flavor and that's fine. But I always think it's funny when people think they're getting some sort of health benefit from drinking alkaline water when that doesn't really make scientific sense to me. Not my area of expertise specifically, but like I know how pH works. And I know that if you add something that's, you know, not got a lot of other stuff in it, it's just this water that's got something added to raise the pH, and you add it to stomach acid, it's going to immediately have a really low pH. So I always think that one's kind of funny. I chuckle a lot. And my husband's like, "Are you laughing at the person's alkaline water?" I'm like, "I am indeed laughing at everything's alkaline water."
Well, that's a fascinating space between like science and marketing. Because I guess if you put alkaline on it, but people are drinking more water because of that, like,
The
okay,
water
it's kind of,
industry's making money, right? Exactly.
well, and people are, I think this sometimes with my kid is like, oh, we had a banana, but it had a Minecraft sticker on it. So now you're eating a banana. And like, that's wonderful.
It's a
I'm just
win
glad
for
we're
you.
eating the
It's a
banana.
win for a parent. And I guess anything that gets the public to drink more water. I mean, drinking water is not bad for you, right? It's good for you. So whatever keeps people hydrated, I suppose. But it is. It's just it's kind of laughable sometimes the claims that you see people put on their food products and really what goes into actually knowing what that claim means. 'Cause some of them have caveats that look a little asterisk. It's like, less sugar now with less sugar. And that has to have some sort of little asterisk. And then on the back, it says our last formulation or then the leading market product or something like that. Yeah, marketing is, I'm glad I don't work in the marketing space. I like to work in, the science is black and white, but the regulations for food labeling are a little bit gray enough. There's enough wiggle room for what can you call something or what can you name something but I like the black and white of food regulations. So those all the time and just ask us. They're like, I saw this label. What does this mean? And the silly thing about extension is like that's my job is to literally field those questions. So if people have food safety questions, food labeling questions, food anything like that, they're more than welcome to reach out to us and we're happy to answer those questions anytime.
And thanks to Melissa for helping us better understand how to navigate conversations about food. If you or someone you know would make for a great curious conversation, email me at traviskw@bt.edu. I'm Travis Williams, and this has been Virginia Tech's Curious Conversations.